Hello, everybody. I am Barbara Lang, and my co-host Brian Boyer and I are delighted to welcome you to another edition of Barbara's Banter. Over the past year and a half on this podcast, we have covered such subjects as culture change, healthcare, the role of women in our history, customer service, returning to the office after COVID, nonprofit engagement, race equity in the workplace, the state of Black America, and so much, much more. So today we thought we would have a discussion on economic development. By most measures, our economy nationally has been doing quite well. Job growth is now higher than pre-pandemic levels. Unemployment is at a 50-year low. Yet, we are hampered by a high rate of inflation and challenges in the supply chain for some goods and supplies. So what's the impact of economic development on the economy? And what are the challenges we may still face? Our guests today are two people that face these questions, the challenges and opportunities, as they vie for more business for their respective jurisdictions, and how they balance it with community needs. Let me introduce them now. First, Danielle Casey, the president and CEO of the Albuquerque Regional Economic Alliance. She has been in the economic development space for a number of years, having served as EVP of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council and the Economic Development Director for the City of Scottsdale. Danielle's undergraduate work was done at Arizona State University and her graduate degree from Northern Arizona University. And she recently received a 2022 Women of Influence honor. Congratulations for that and welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Our second guest is someone I have known for many years, Victor Hoskins, president and CEO of the Fairfax County, Virginia Economic Development Authority. I think Victor has covered this region, having served in similar roles in Prince George's County, Maryland, Arlington County, Virginia, where he was instrumental in bringing Amazon to the county. And he was deputy mayor for economic development and planning for the District of Columbia, where I worked closely with him when I was at the Chamber of Commerce. He's also had some private sector roles, to include Fannie Mae, and I knew him there. Victor's undergraduate degree is from Dartmouth. His master's is from MIT, and he's done some work at Harvard. Victor has received numerous awards and honors for all of his work in the economic development world. Welcome to Barbara's Banter, Victor. Delighted to have you.
Thank you, Barbara. Great to see you again.
As our audience can see, we have two guests today with outstanding economic development bona fides. So let's get to the questions and topics that will be on our viewers' minds. So I want to start with first having each of you talk a little bit about the area that you represent, both Northern Virginia and Albuquerque, New Mexico, and citing the industries that are major economic engines for you. Danielle, would you like to start?
Absolutely. So in full disclosure, I've been in the greater Albuquerque region for just about a year and a half now. And doing this in the middle of a pandemic is about the most surreal experience you can ever have. But it's also been amazing and fascinating. It's a tremendously welcoming community. And so just unbelievable. Sometimes apparently being locked in your home office allows you to do a lot of homework and research and hold some one-on-one meetings that you maybe be pulled away from when you're otherwise new to a market. So greater Albuquerque, and I'm a very, very big proponent of regionalism and economic development. I really have never seen any consultants or businesses pick a very, very narrow boundary of a community that's part of a greater region. They're always picking an economic market. They're picking an overall labor shed and then determining the exact perfect location for them in there. And our job as economic developers, one of the many jobs, is to make sure we stay in that race and we stay in the shortlist for those companies in their site selection process, along with all the other community development and things that we do, which I'm certain we'll talk about. So our region, if you also include Santa Fe County, which I really believe is also fundamentally and without question connected to the greater Albuquerque economy, we're about 1 million people in that labor shed and in that market. So that's just a really nice round number to throw out there. And then the target industries that are really fascinating. And part of this came from and was born out of a very intense strategic planning process that we had. When I came on board, I realized the organization had not gone through that exercise formally with its board of directors, at least in recent memory for everyone serving. So it's really hard to know how much gas you need if you don't know where you're flying the plane to. So we sat down and said, all right, this is the perfect time for a great reset. I looked at our website when I came on board as the president and said, wow, we have 12 target industries identified. It's great to try to be everything to everyone, but are we doing any of these right? Or well, and so yeah, you get it, Victor. So we refined that and really narrowed it down to 6, which is still quite a bit. But aerospace is a target industry. We're looking at aerospace and defense. The presence and the depth of the intellect and skill sets and the investment through Sandia Labs and our federal presence in New Mexico is unbelievably understated externally. We're the home of directed energy. We're doing unbelievable things. And I'll talk a little later as we chat about what that means for our skill sets and our labor population. So tremendous opportunity in the future, I believe, to spin off in that realm. Biosciences, believe it or not, when you do all of this data analysis and cluster analysis, and you dig deep into not only what's growing in industries across the country and the world, but also the assets that you have in your local community, you start to see things align and realize that if you push the needle a little bit in this direction, you could really snowball an industry in a significant way. So we're taking a deep dive look on that. We've got actually a big delegation, not including me, but a big group out at the Bio International Conference this week as we speak. Renewable energy is something pretty amazing for greater Albuquerque and New Mexico. We announced earlier this year a group called Universal Hydrogen, which is creating capsules that will essentially bottle hydrogen so that they can power electric engines for airplanes. Unbelievable application there. Really strong connection to renewable energy. Ultimately, we know that's a transition, and there's a lot of conversations out there about hydrogen, so we won't get into that so deep today. But what's really amazing is we're seeing companies announce in our market because they have the opportunity to have 100% renewable energy. So we've got a large Facebook data center investment here, and we just announced a very significant manufacturer, a recycling manufacturer. It's actually Ball, and for aluminum cans, and they're doing that because they can do this also 100% renewable. So it's a unique niche that I believe Albuquerque and New Mexico can serve in. You've probably heard about our digital media and film. So I have a problem getting into my office. I actually office out of the tallest building in New Mexico. It's 21 stories tall in downtown Albuquerque, and they film constantly. So it's probably at least one day a week where I have to navigate how I get into my office because of filming through the different studios. And then we're, I think, probably like any other community other than extremely urbanized communities, looking at manufacturing and what reshoring and onshoring opportunities are meaning for our communities, as well as those advanced applications because of the economic multiplier. So I'll pause there. There's a little bit of industry knowledge and a sense of the size of our market.
You've got an awful lot going on in Albuquerque. Nice to hear about that. Victor, tell us about Northern Virginia and Fairfax County in particular.
Sure. Northern Virginia is a region of about 10 jurisdictions that compose a population of about 2.4 million. We actually are within the 5th largest economy in the United States, which is the greater Washington region. So we cluster right around Washington, D.C. In that market, there's 6 million people, 3 million workers. So Fairfax specifically, we are 1.2 million people. And in Fairfax, we have the 2nd largest suburban office market in the country, second only to Orange County, California. We spend a lot of our focus on clearly Fortune 500 companies. Fortunately, we have 10 Fortune 500 headquarters in Fairfax County. And that is extraordinary, given the fact that You know, when you look at some states, they don't even have one. So we feel very fortunate to be in that position. The majority of our companies are technology companies. About a third of our jobs are technology jobs. We have headquarters like Hilton, consulting companies like Accenture, Booz Allen, KPMG. Many of them, you know, obviously serve the federal government because we have the largest customer in the world, which is the Pentagon, sitting in North Virginia. Their budget is about 700 billion, so maybe it's 750 billion now. But we're very fortunate to have them here. They used to compose, actually, government jobs used to compose half of our economy. Now it's about a third. We've really diversified our industries. We have low-code companies like Appian, which was the most successful IPO of 2017. We have, you know, companies like ID.me, which is a security company, which is really like all over the United States now, Alarm.com and others. So we've been very fortunate that we've had both small and large successes. We really have focused on small businesses quite a bit in the last couple of years, delivering services directly to businesses with 50 employees or less, and really focused on women, minority, and underrepresented groups such as veterans. And with that, Barbara, I'll turn it back to you.
Oh, wow, it's an awful lot. You've got a lot going on, and I'm right here. I won't ask you to say which of the jurisdictions you have served in you like the best. That would not be fair, would it?
All of them. All of them. I love all my children. Equally.
Absolutely.
The last 2.5 years have been challenging. And Danielle, you said that you came in to your role about 1.5 years ago. And I know, Victor, you have been there from the beginning, well, before COVID. But talk a little bit about how this has been challenging for you. The stay at home, and I know that has a big impact to the office market. I serve on a publicly traded office REIT out of Atlanta, and we have holdings in Northern Virginia and in DC, as well as other places around the country. And I know we're so anxious to get people back into those offices, but it looks like things will change a bit, and you'll see more of a hybrid environment. But talk a little bit about what the last 2.5 years have been like for you. Whichever one of you want to start, it's okay.
Ladies first. Go ahead, Danielle.
You're so kind. And if I can interject, Victor, it is such a cool honor to meet you, by the way. The economic development profession is not that deep. So we all know people that know each other. You know, there's about, I think I'm on the board of the International Economic Development Council. We just talked this weekend, and our membership is about 4,700 members. And, you know, there's far less certified economic developers. Anyway, it's a small network, but I'm still always, you know, it's just like when celebrities, and not that we're celebrities, but, you know, in Hollywood, they go, I have a professional crush. It's like that when you get to meet another awesome economic developer. I just wanted to digress a little bit on that. Wow, COVID, right? So I found myself when COVID hit in Northern California, in the greater Sacramento region, unbelievable market, really tremendous potential, and having a blast doing tons of fun work there. We were really retooling completely the regional organization in that market. And I see a lot of parallels. You know, Victor, it's interesting when you talk about obviously your government jobs and the diversification you're doing, which is fantastic. Albuquerque has about a location quotient of 1.4 for our concentration of government jobs, which means we've got about 1.4 times the concentration of government jobs than a typical community in the US would have. And Sacramento was very much the same, almost identical. So we're doing a lot of work. We're doing work with Brookings and other institutions to really analyze that and educate the community on what that meant, good and bad, because it helps you sometimes stay the course through a challenging time like this when you do have guaranteed government jobs. But it also can put you in peril when you have different federal cuts or other issues, and then you're overly dependent on one industry and you don't have that diversification and entrepreneurial growth, especially with those SMEs, those small and medium enterprises. So here I am in the middle of the pandemic hit in March. And by that summer, we're all like, oh, this is going to be over. And I'm in my little condo a mile from the state capitol in California. As you know, there was a lot of civil unrest. And when you're living in a downtown market, you hear it and see it and smell it and witness it in a very different way than you would if you weren't there. And the state capital of California, I know many capitals had extreme levels of intensity, but that was certainly one that got some visibility. And it was also on fire. So we had significant wildfires. So I'm in my condo a mile from the state capitol, dealing with announcements of, probably not good to leave the house tonight. And also there's an inch of soot on the back porch. And at the same time, you're dealing with what every other business is dealing with. How do you keep your employees engaged and working and doing the hard work? And for many of us, I think all of us, the work was even more intense because now you're being called on to try to figure out how to completely pivot your work deliverable and how you're serving the community, especially as a nonprofit. But how do you motivate those people when they're also having personal fears and issues? And we had employees who had kids who were now home. And I had one employee who dialed into a call one day and he had locked himself in his master bedroom closet because that was the only way he could escape and actually do a team call. Boy, that's dedication, right? So I think with all of that, but the big kicker is, really also trying to figure out and understand your role. So I'll just throw something out here and then toss it to Victor on what we learned about partnerships and the absolute criticality. There are chambers of commerce that some do economic development, some don't. There are economic development entities, some are partnered with chambers, some are not. Some of them are very competitive among each other. I mean, there's all kinds of dynamics between EDOs, chambers, and other service organizations. And there are a lot of nonprofits out there that all, we're also now seeing themselves in a challenging time going, are we going to lose all of our funding because all of our businesses are having these challenges? So I'll say what we learned and what we did that I was very proud of is we immediately mobilized pretty significantly and sat down with our chamber partners, with all of our elected officials and said, who's really good at what? And let's talk about this. And you do what you're really good at, and we're going to champion that and promote it. We're going to do what we're very good at and champion it and promote it. And that's what we have to do for the community. So our Chamber of Commerce mobilized significantly in supporting small business. We offered our research tools and resources to help support that effort in partnership with them. And then we also sat back and when we were asked the question, because I was serving, as the second in command for a regional economic development group, the Sacramento market that we served was about 2.4 million, a 6-county area. And when we were asked, well, what is your organization doing for small business? We said, we're partnering with and supporting the Chamber of Commerce. That's their role. Our job is to make sure that our major employers and manufacturers and other entities that support those base jobs that are export industries, that are manufacturing equipment and supplies and things that are needed for PPE, that those don't skip a beat. And then we're advocating for them and making sure that they continue operations. So we did do quite a bit of intervention there. And I know the Albuquerque Regional Group here prior to my arrival also did a lot of advocacy to make sure that it was clear which businesses were mission critical and had to stay open. So I'll toss it over to Victor and get some tidbits from him.
Challenging times. Victor, how did Northern Virginia fare, and how are you guys doing? How do you come out of it?
So I mentioned the 10 jurisdictions in Northern Virginia that work together. We created an economic development alliance about 6 months before the pandemic hit, which was really a very fortunate thing because many of us, our unemployment rates were in the low twos. Ours was 2.3. We had neighbors at 2.1, very low unemployment, but it shot up to 14% in 30 days. Yeah, and that was a shock to the system. So we deployed a group of a set of strategies really to focus on different segments of the market. We found that most of our technology companies did quite well. What they did was they created telework structures. Many of them went to the cloud, and even we did that. We went from no one telecommuting to the entire group working from home in 48 hours because we migrated to the cloud like many of our clients do. And then what we really found was that in battling this, we really had to focus on, again, these businesses with 50 employees or less, and a lot of them being service businesses. So we carved out that segment. The county put together $52 million. They had never given a dime to a company in the history of the county. They put together $52 million, which we helped deploy to 4,800 companies all with 50 employees and less. And 71% of those companies were women, veteran, or minority-owned businesses. A lot of people don't realize that actually the economy, the entire economy of Fairfax County and of Northern Virginia is very diverse. Our economy, 41% of our companies are minority or women-owned companies. So we are very, very diverse in terms of our makeup. So, but it impacted everyone. So for the next, last 2.5 years, we've been fighting that battle of getting people back in business. Early on, it was getting them connected to PPP money. We got $2 billion for our companies through PPP and EIDL. Then it was, how do we administer these grants? We work with the county. We're not a county agency. We're outside of the county. We work with the county agency and with the small business development center in order to administer and deploy that capital. Our main job was marketing. And like Danielle said, everybody took up their mantle of what they did best and executed. And I got to say that the business center did a brilliant job of really looking at the criteria. And we actually shared our criteria of what businesses that we were going to provide, what and why. We did this with our other 9 jurisdictions. So we were sharing application processes, review processes. We deployed that capital. And then we went to the pivot, where we were educating our folks in how to use systems that didn't require in-person. If they were food service, they could deliver. We set them up on delivery platforms. We brought in Facebook, we brought in Google, Uber. We brought in these groups to basically teach them about the technology. And then we continued to educate them on how to get back in business. And then the county came up with another grant program called the Pivot Program, helping nonprofits and for-profits pivot their company back into the economy, because a lot of them were pushed outside. Our unemployment rate right now is 2.3%, one of the lowest, and actually the third lowest of a jurisdiction of the size in the nation. We have an incredible growth push going on right now. Before the pandemic, we were in Northern Virginia, we had about 42,000 job openings. Right now, we have 166,000 job openings. So it's been a real growth spurt for us, believe it or not. We've had more business formations than we've had in the history of I think the last time they hit a number like this, we were about 38,000. This happened back in 2011. So it's kind of like 2011 all over. That was a financial crisis. This was a pandemic crisis. But we're doing quite well right now. And I think really what we're doing and what a lot of people are trying to do is realize, where do we get the talent from? Talent is at the core of our business right now. I can talk about the talent initiative that we created. I'm not going to get into that right now because it's a deep subject, but it's become like the #1 commodity. When we attracted Amazon to Arlington, when I was in Arlington directing economic development, and we attracted Amazon HQ2, 37,000 jobs, $4 billion in investment, 4 million square feet. We were able to get them not because of Arlington. Arlington is the smallest self-governed jurisdiction in the United States. It's only 26.7 square miles. It was not the size. What we did was we went to the region and we looked at all of our educational institutions, 60 educational institutions, 400,000 enrolled, producing 90,000 degree candidates every year. And we used that as our argument to Amazon, say there's not just enough for you, but there's enough for everybody. And then created 2 tech campuses, Virginia Tech, which is $1 billion tech campus, which is in Alexandria, which is about 1.5 miles from Amazon HQ2, and then one right in Arlington, which is about 2 miles away, George Mason University Tech Center. So those are the things that we did, all in the midst of this whole pandemic, which is awesome.
No problem.
Congratulations to you both. It looks like partnerships with other entities was the key to getting a lot of what you got done. What was the industries that may have been hit the hardest? Was it hospitality, restaurants, those?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
In person, anything that was in person, boutiques, and even temporarily construction, because a lot of them didn't have PPP and didn't have any testing kits, and we paid for those things in order to get them back on the job.
Yeah. Well, a lot of, do you have any idea in terms of either one of you of the number of businesses that failed and was not able to return?
That's, I'll toss in and say, well, and hopping markets, so I don't have that figure off the top of my head for those markets. But it would be a very interesting deep dive in comparison. And then also figuring out which were, kind of forced to make the permanent shutdown decision because of the impacts of COVID,
Mhm.
or those that were maybe already having financial challenges or otherwise. Because as you know, small business is a very tough business to be in.
They're living on the brink as it is.
Traditional success rate is already highly challenging. So, you know, compounding that is just, it has just been unbelievable.
But you know, Victor knows this area well, because where I am is in the Tenleytown to Friendship Heights area in Washington. And we lost Neiman Marcus out of here, Lord and Taylor's out of here. The whole Mazda Gallery thing is shut down. And then a lot of the smaller businesses along Wisconsin Avenue didn't survive. A liquor store that had been here for decades shut down. So I assume that COVID had a lot to do with it. But you can see along this corridor, a lot of the businesses did not return. They did not survive, and that's unfortunate. Do you have working with your government, whether it's the governor or the legislature, is very key to economic development? And Victor, I know you have a new governor that came in the office in January. How has that been for you all in terms of working with the governments? Because you need a business-friendly legislature and business-friendly executive in order to accomplish a lot of the things that you do. Do both of you have that?
Yes, you know, because you mentioned a new governor, I might as well just jump in first. So our new governor, Governor Youngkin, he came out of Carlyle Group, which is an investment corporation, multi-billion-dollar investment corporation. He was, I think, employee number 25 or 28 or something. Anyway, he's brought a breath of additional fresh air to an environment that's already pro-business. So the state of Virginia is a pro-business state. It's had a corporate tax rate the same for almost 60 years. It's a very consistent, well-run state government as well as local government. As a matter of fact, our jurisdiction is a AAA bond rated agency. All three bond houses rate as AAA, and it's been that way for us for like 50 years. It's been that way for the state for 80 years. So the power of consistent government has been really a backbone of what we do. The second thing is our educational system is incredible. We have the #1 high school in the country.
Right.
100% graduate, 100% qualified to go to college. Thomas Jefferson High School, the best high school in the nation, is in Fairfax County, and the schools tear down that way. Economic mobility. We're of the 150 jurisdictions in the United States, we're ranked #2 for the most economic mobility. You start off, low income and you move up into middle or upper income. We rank #2 in the nation for that. So we have an incredible government that's really built an amazing environment for prosperity. Now, the proof point on that, though, continues with CNBC for the second year in a row ranked us in 2021 as the #1 state to do business. So the state government has created this environment. The county governments follow on to the state, and then the local cities do the same. So overall, we have a very, very powerful kind of government profile. In addition to that, we're not just recognized by CNBC, but also Facilities Magazine. Business Facilities Magazine ranked us #1 place to do business 2 years in a row. And that's because, again, I know, it's because of our pro-business legislation.
Sure.
It's because we are a right to work state in an environment like some of our neighbors are not right to work. So that, even though that doesn't mean as much today as it did during the manufacturing days, it's really important to, in terms of perception. And I think that when you throw in that great schools, and by the way, we are the safest county in the nation with a population of over 1 million. So you throw all of that together and you're like, well, why wouldn't you live here?
Well, I'm gonna give you a chance to give me that pitch at the end here.
And with that, I'll turn it over to Danielle.
Sure. Well, and backing up a little bit, on your comments on what you all did regionally for HQ2, Victor, I've been using that as an example to push on my leaders and partners in both of the communities I've been in recently, reminding them how critical labor is, but how absolutely unequivocally critical it is to be able to lay out and show that you have a plan for how you're going to deliver talent, not today, but in the future. And I'll tell you really frankly, that's something we're working on in New Mexico. So, this market in this state is really unique and amazing. Our governor's a 16th generation New Mexican. And you see that quite a bit. So you see families with very, very deep and rich cultural history in this market. And so, what that'll do for you is you definitely get into this, how we've done things, but there's absolutely a very, very big tide happening in New Mexico and greater Albuquerque, and also recognizing that if we don't pull together and move forward in designing our future, we're going to frankly continue to be left behind and have some challenges. So when you mentioned education, Victor, when I think about greater Albuquerque, we have some of the highest PhD rates in comparison to other competitor markets. So the ones we're looking at are, the Denvers, the Phoenixes, Salt Lakes, El Paso's, Tucson's. But in our public school system, we have the lowest four-year high school graduation rate. Not acceptable, but something that is heavily on our radar that we have to tackle. So we do have to recognize those realities. And through the strategic planning process we did, and then subsequently our state economic development department went through a similar exercise, utilized a ton of our data. So piggybacked on what we did and then expanded that for the entire state. There's tremendous energy and excitement about now advancing these strategies in a way that haven't happened in the past. I'm having very intentional conversations I'm actually presenting to our legislative finance committee tomorrow. And one of my messages to them as to how we can actually advance the state of New Mexico, but also our region. And by the way, greater Albuquerque is 50% of the population, 50% of the jobs. So as greater Albuquerque goes, so does the state, truthfully. And educating them and talking to them about, if we don't invest adequately in economic development marketing activities, in thinking about talent and how we're affecting that talent and our future labor, that we're going to continue to see more of the same. I think this market, it was funny. So when I announced to my CEO when I was in Sacramento that I was leaving him and coming to take this role, he said, "Well, why would you go to Albuquerque? Why wouldn't you go to a Denver or somewhere that's really popping or something like that?" And I said, I've looked at the data, and I think I can absolutely make a difference in this market in a way I'm going to be able to see, touch, and feel real results in 5 years, and most certainly 10 years, which is a pretty fast runway, actually, if you're trying to affect an economy in a significant way. And we're already seeing evidence of that. When Victor talks about regionalism and the work they're doing there, when I came into this market, our name as an organization, and we've been around 60 years, we were spun out of the chamber as an economic development organization in the 60s. And our name when I came in was Albuquerque Economic Development Incorporated. Very confusing because it sounds like we're the city. It sounds like we are only serving the city of Albuquerque and very city centric. So as you can imagine, and I'm sure like Victor's ears are pinging, what does that do for any other community in the region? It's a little bit off-putting. Well, do we matter? So we have suburb communities in our market, Rio Rancho and Valencia County and the village of Las Lunas, which we just made a major announcement in, which is also the home to Facebook. Rio Rancho, or actually Sandoval County, is the home to our large Intel footprint here. Very off-putting and very confusing when you're working with clients and external partners that are looking at the market, but also confusing internally. I drove around in my first couple of months to get a tour of the market with a commercial real estate broker who said, "Well, I know we're leaving your jurisdiction to go over here," but I said, "What are you talking about?" So we weren't very, very clearly and intentionally demonstrating the criticality of regionalism.
Yeah, they're bringing it together. Yeah.
After we completed our strategic plan, I went to my board and I said, we've got to change the name of the organization. And then we have to create a pathway for meaningful public-private participation, because we'd always been a private business entity and never permitted or invited public sector partners to serve on a voting seat on our board. They were ex officios, or they were invited to sit in the back of the room and listen, but not actually participate and weigh in on what we were doing to try to advance the regional economy. So we've made some really significant strides there. And I will tell you, the temperature of the market has changed dramatically. I now have had different public sector entities from around the region invest in our organization and join our board of directors for the first time in 60 years.
Well,
So
it sounds like, and both of you are saying that you've got to embrace others around you. Because if one of you is winning, the region wins, and how do you foster that cooperation? Brian, why don't you jump in here? You've been silent. I know you've got some questions to ask as well.
As you know, this may be the longest I've ever gone without speaking. Listening is great. And I do have to say also that if I were making a choice of where to locate a business, Albuquerque, Fairfax County, I don't know, both they have great spokespeople here, so I don't even know which one I would pick. But I do want to ask a question about you both mentioned small business, which I thought was interesting because we do hear a lot in the media and in the economic development world about headquarters and big companies coming into a state or a city. But you did both mention small business, which I thought was really interesting. And I don't know that necessarily a lot of people realize that small business is really a backbone or the backbone, right, of business and economic development and community engagement. Barbara and I used to do a lot of that at the DC Chamber. So I guess my question to both of you would be, can you talk a little bit more about that role of the small business community? The local businesses, the people who have been there for generations, that when as companies come and go, these are the businesses that are always there. Can you talk a little bit both about that role and how important that role is to the work that you do and your mission?
Yeah, I will tell you this, first of all, Brian, 90% of all of our businesses in our county are small businesses. That is by the definition of the SBA. And that's about 500 employees or less. And of those, probably 90% of that share of 90% is actually businesses with 50 employees or less. So these are really small businesses. We used to serve about 1,000 of those a year. We now serve about 5,000 of those a year. And as a matter of fact, we peaked last year with 18,000. So during COVID, it obviously accelerated because they had the most problems. I mentioned we have a very diverse business ownership. At 41% of our businesses are owned by minorities or people of color. But our population itself is actually 50.2 people of color. So there are more people of color in our county than there are Caucasians. And that is always really surprising to people. But that ties it directly into our small business. So we have this thing called Entrepreneurship 101, where people are constantly starting businesses. Prior to COVID, we used to get maybe 45, 50 people at each session. Now we get 100, 150, sometimes 250 people on a session, because first of all, it's virtual, which is easier to get to. And second of all, we kind of changed our approach. We actually bring entrepreneurs who have been successful to be our keynote speaker. We have all the same thing that we've always done. We bring the SBA in to talk about their lending programs. We bring the technical assistant groups in to talk about its technical assistance program. Bring in SCORE counselors to talk about SCORE counseling. So we bring all of that in, but at the end, there's a speaker who's an entrepreneur. And people love to hear the inspirational, and we bring them an inspirational entrepreneur. Sometimes they're entrepreneurs that have just built small companies, like they built a restaurant. Or maybe 3 restaurants. And then we have other companies that have built like behemoths. They've gone from restaurant to full service to hotel service to like a hospitality, mega business. Actually, it's one company, African-American owned, created, actually 800 million was their revenue for last year. But they started out as a small company.
Right.
And they've grown it in an amazing way. And we like people to hear these stories. Young African-American entrepreneur who made cookies and now sells them at Whole Foods. He was on Shark Tank and he won. And from that, he ended up being a client, actually working directly with Whole Foods. But these are the kind, we've tried to be more creative and inventive, but there always are people looking for establishing businesses. And I just mentioned, we're at 38,000 establishments is a peak for us. The last peak like that was back in 2011. So I think when the economy blows up, a lot of people rethink how they're going to go back to work, and they often build small businesses. So we have a really, really robust system for that.
I think the thing to add to that too is that people forget that small businesses are usually the ones that hire from the local communities.
Mhm.
And that's also important. Danielle, I think you want to respond to Brian's question.
Absolutely. Well, so what I'll do is you covered that piece so well. I'll talk about business retention and expansion as a really key and critical tool in economic development and serving your local business community. So what this means, it's not the sexy part. It's not the big, massive announcement, and we're bringing in this big fish, and we get, all this recognition, because that's really what people want to see and touch and feel is that big announcement. But your local companies, as Victor said, are the backbone of your community. Everything from service-oriented businesses, but really to those small and mid-sized entities and manufacturers especially. So when I came into this market, I realized, we'd had some consultants working on our behalf that were helping companies understand and learn how to navigate state incentive programs. And that's great. We have actually one of the most robust and supportive job training incentive programs of any that I've seen in the country. Really, it's our JTIP program is really fabulous. It's a shining star in our economic development toolkit for New Mexico. And so we educate and work with businesses on how to access those, the right way to go about using that, whether they should use those dollars or WIOA dollars, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act dollars, to get employees trained and move forward. But we realize that with that consulting group, we're a very small organization. We run less than a $2 million budget, about 10 people. So it's strappy. So I pulled that back in and created a full-time staffing positions for that, because I realized they were helping them with that, but there was never a conversation with the company saying, what are your obstacles? What's holding you back in this community? What buyers and suppliers do you know? And who do you need in this market that's going to help you grow? What are your facilities needs and challenges, and what's going on? Just checking in with these firms to see how we can assist, because that information then can actually inform your business attraction strategy. Who are you going after? How are you bringing them in? And what's your value proposition? And what I've told everyone in my market, in my state, as well as is that I believe an economic development organization such as mine, at least the way we're structured, that 50% of the work we do should be responding to and changing our competitive position. So every time we get a lead or an opportunity, or we work with a company and we don't win or they aren't successful, how are we now fixing why we weren't successful, if that's truly a good match industry for our community? Not all are. So, and you can be picky and choosy about what makes sense for your market. So we pulled that back in, and I'd say just a really nice little example this spring is we had a company called Allstate Steel. They've been here 30 years, family-owned company, not a massive entity, about 60 employees, but they had also purchased property in our neighboring community in the greater Phoenix area, which I served in for, for a decade and a half. So I know it well, but we just called on this local company just for the heck of it, out of the blue. How are you? What's going on? And they said, wow, we're about a week and a half away from making a board decision to fully relocate to Arizona. We said, wow, that's really unfortunate. We need to keep you here. You've got a long time presence in this community. Give us 4 days to get with the state, the local community, pull together some incentives and tools that are going to maybe help close that delta for you in the competitive makeup of what it's going to cost you to do your expansion here versus there. Let us rally our educational institutions so they can also help you with talent development as well as attraction. And we have some programs for that. And got back in front of them, pulled everybody together, had a great proposal. And 2 weeks later, they decided to double down and stay in the greater Albuquerque market and expand here. And now they're also going to be, they're patenting some new manufacturing processes, and they'll be exporting that. So that's going to grow them by about 50 or 100%. So there'll be 100 employees. If you can have 10 successes like that a year in a community like mine, you're winning. You are winning. And what was really interesting is the company even allowed us to quote them in the paper. And they said, thanks for the incentives and the cash. It helped. The other jurisdiction offered us more. It was because you rallied and because everybody from the governor down to the local community said, you matter and we care and we're here to support you. So I'm really proud of that as a pivot, because that's not how we were operating as a regional entity even, 12 months ago.
Sure.
Economic development is a team sport, right? We all know that. I have one more question. We're going to start to wrap up here. I have one more question before I pass it back to Barbara for the final question, which is one of my favorite questions. But real quick, so Danielle, you are a regional organization, but as you said, you're based right in Albuquerque. Victor, you're in the suburbs of DC. Talk a little bit about how important it is to have a really strong urban core, even though you're regional organizations and you want the region to thrive.
Yeah.
A lot of it
Yeah.
stops and starts with the city that you're located, the closest city, whether it's a capital city or a hub of some technology or whatnot. Whoever wants to answer it first, but I'd like to hear from both of you. I know that there are some jurisdictions where, if a company locates in the town next door, they're not happy about that, even though it's for the greater good. But talk a little bit about the urban core and the importance of having that thriving city environment in your area and how that helps you, attract businesses, retain talent, and help you do your job and achieve your goals and mission.
Well, I describe DC as the hub of the wheel that the entire economy spins around. So that 700,000 people that are in Washington DC have about 5.3 million people spinning around them. Essentially, it is the core. But what's so great about the region is that they've made some decisions that in terms of metro being the mass transit, which have really paid off in the long run, not just for the District of Columbia, but for the suburbs. And right now, we are starting to really yield those benefits here in Fairfax County. I call us an urbanizing suburb. I did a presentation at my alma mater at MIT to a bunch of planning students and professors about the urbanization of a suburb. And I talked about what has happened is these metro centers where and look, this happened before I got there. This was about 2010, 2011, they started doing this planning, and it's now manifesting in 3 dimensions. We have one metro station cluster, I call it, because there are 4 stations serve this location, but they're all right in a row. It's called Tyson's. It's 28 million square feet of office space. That's larger than many office markets in the country. And then in addition to that, it has about 35,000, 40,000 people living there right now. And before it only had about 5,000, 10,000. So it is really becoming an urban center. We have Reston Town Center, another one that is a cluster. It's about 18 million square feet. Again, larger than many downtowns in many cities around the nation. So these metro stations, the metro accessibility is becoming a critical factor, particularly for the young talent, between 25 and 45. They like them. They like using mass transit. They like, and by the way, all of these places are now being networked with bike paths. So they could, use bikes or use those scooters.
But those scooters drive me crazy when I'm driving.
I'm terrified of the scooters, so
Me
I'm not on
too.
those. But that is really basically what it comes down to is people want to be around people. And also when you get that clustering, you can get activities that you can't get in a suburban area. And the clustering really creates, these kind of economic centers. Like when I was in DC and I was deputy mayor, and Barbara knows this, I focused on creating, helping our developers create places. City Center, $1 billion center now, gorgeous, high-end shopping. The Wharf, $2.25 billion development on the waterfront. The District of Columbia had really never developed the waterfront.
Mm-hmm.
The O Street Market, which is in the old, right near Howard University. Just a $330 million development with senior housing, with a giant, because it was about a 60,000 square foot giant, hotel, beautiful mixed use, market rate. These projects create the places. 8th Street development went from people being afraid to be on 8th Street to being an active center now. You can't even rent over there now. So the bottom line is this: you need those places, but you also need places of low density because to be honest with you, if they're reachable by mass transit, you get a great quality of life and you commute. I used to commute in, believe it or not, from Baltimore City to Washington, D.C. when I worked in D.C. So when I was in the private sector working in D.C. So that is the thing you can do here. You can't do that in every region. So we feel very fortunate about that, Brian. And thank you for your question.
That's huge. Yeah, that's huge. Danielle, what think about Albuquerque?
No, I can echo that. When I got to Greater Albuquerque, spoke on a panel and I heard someone from University of New Mexico refer to the market as a rural city. I thought, wow, that's fascinating. It's a really interesting take on it, a rural, and if you come here, you would get that, you would feel that, and I think that lends to some of the extraordinary beauty of this part of the country as well. But it's a big piece of, economic development has absolutely, what I love about the profession is that it's ever changing. It's gone from traditional smokestack chasing to now a huge piece of our work is community building and placemaking, as Victor said, because it's all about labor and talent, and it's all about what type of environment do they want to live in and thrive in and interact in. And all I can tell you is I've absolutely never seen, no matter where they were locating in a region, any, business or, business leadership that's exploring a new market not look at what the urban core looked like as part of their decision-making, even if they were locating 30 minutes out, 45 minutes out, because that's also an indication of the health of the community and the level of investment that local leaders want to make in that community. So there's a lot going on now in the city of Albuquerque, focusing and doubling down on downtown, thinking about different investments. They're going to be rolling out some new plans in the near future. So I'm very excited about that and weighing in. And it kind of goes back to, as part of the restructure of this organization, we had not previously had a way for business leaders to engage and help inform and drive our strategy forward. So I stood up several advisory councils, one on tech and innovation, one on competitiveness, one focused on bio-life sciences, because it just is such a piece of low-hanging fruit for us. And we'll roll more out in the future as we get our legs under us. But I asked a local entrepreneur who was actually from DC, and then he spun out a big data, a tech company out of Sandia Labs. And so he's really popular in the local community. His name is Charles. He runs a company called RS21. I said, Charles, I need you to stand up this group for me and bring all the local tech and innovation leaders, whatever their space is, together to just tell me what we need to do to make this the right market for them to grow and thrive, as well as to bring similar companies and interests to the market. Because if I have a strong enough voice there, then I can actually take that and turn that into something I put in front of the legislature. Mm-hmm. So his comment to me was, you know what? I'm pulling talent out of Sandia Labs. So I've got PhDs, I've got the people I need. And he said, but if downtown doesn't become cool soon, we're dead. And so I said, okay, great. I didn't realize that it didn't even occur to me that as a regional economic development group, that my play on tech and innovation is probably going to be in advocacy for downtown. But when you think about it that way, it makes all the sense in the world. So we're about to jump in feet first or head first or whatever. I just hope I have a life jacket. It's going to be fun.
Very good.
That's exciting. Barbara, I'm going to right back to you to kind of wrap it up here and bring us home. But I do have to apologize. I lied. I didn't intentionally lie. I said, for 45 minutes ish on this, but I should have figured that Danielle and Victor would have, a lot more content for us than just that. I wish we had a 3-hour show here, but
Right. That's right. That's right. Well, thank you. Well, my final question really is something that Victor started on a little bit earlier, and that is I'm going to pretend that I am this large business in the tourism hospitality industry looking to relocate my corporate headquarters.
Thanks.
And I'm attending ICSC in Las Vegas this year. Mm-hmm. And I want you to give me your best pitch in 1 minute on why to locate to Fairfax County or why to locate to Albuquerque. So Victor, you started this a little earlier, so I'll let you go first on this one.
Okay, 1 minute. All right.
Yeah.
Well, Fairfax County is in Northern Virginia, right next to DC. And because of that, we're in a very advantageous situation. We have the largest agglomeration of hospitality companies in the United States. We have Hilton, which is in Tyson's, which is in Northern Virginia. We have Bethesda-based Marriott. We have many of the smaller brands. It is an incredible agglomeration. But in addition to that, we have 60 universities, and these 60 universities produce about 100,000 students, about 100,000 students every year, about conferred degrees. That's 90,000 really. And those degrees, some of them actually are concentrations in hospitality. So we're very fortunate that we have the majors. We also have a pipeline of talent. So if your company wants to grow, you want to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Danielle.
So can I just be crazy and put a little spin on this and say, I don't know that that's what I go after in terms of an industry for my market. So that's always an important piece of what you have to think about when you're working on your community. We have a history in Greater Albuquerque of being a bit of a call center and data center location. But those are the roles that we're very thankful for those, but we also want to spin out against those and look at more middle office and office growth. Although the size of our market right now is probably not quite one for a significant headquarters of that size in that specific industry. What I would go after, so what I'd like to do is spin it on, I have people at Bio International right now. We would love to see significant innovation in bio life sciences come to our market, and a couple of reasons. We are an absolute burgeoning market, and you can be a very big fish in a small pond. You can have direct connection to our governor, to our state legislature, to think about how we're designing the future of this market for the industry. UNM Health Sciences Center, we've got an amazing cancer center here. There's tremendous investment in those types of products and also in the education that we're spinning out. And I've got a lot of dirt owned by the universities that we're starting to assemble and think about how are we creating a strong innovation center for this industry. Innovate ABQ is a wonderful investment through UNM in our downtown, focused again on the bio life sciences industry and burgeoning that forward. And our community college is probably one of the best that I've ever seen in terms of starting to stand up new curriculum and support businesses. So with that, I would say that I would love to bring some even smaller to mid-sized industries. So I'd like to see a bio life sciences firm with a couple hundred employees looking at our market seriously and thinking about being a leading anchor for driving that forward in our market.
Thank you. Thank you both. You took a very different spin on that.
Why not?
Well, this discussion could go on for another hour because I've got 3 or 4 more questions that I didn't get to ask, but time is running out, and that's all the time that we have for today. Danielle, Victor, thank you so much for joining us today for this very robust conversation. While we all want to be optimistic, there are some roadblocks and challenges ahead with our economy, with looking at whether a recession is coming, with the supply chain. We hear it in the news ad nauseum over and over every day. But we look forward to the work that people like you do every day. And of course, we monitor the daily, the president's agenda, as well as the role of the Federal Reserve to stave off this recession. And to our viewing and listening audience, thank you for joining us also today. Please remember to pick up a copy of my book, Madam President, Leadership Lessons from the Top of the Ladder, and it is available on Amazon. It was released last year. Thanks, everybody. See you next time.